At 4,730 feet, 15 miles short of the Nevada state line, this road reaches the highest point on the entire drive between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. There's no gas station up here. For long stretches on either side, there's no cell signal either. And if you cross this summit after dark, on a weekend night in July, with the asphalt still breathing the day's 105-degree heat back into a black desert sky, you are, according to federal crash data published in 2025, on the deadliest stretch of interstate highway in the entire United States. You've probably driven it. Almost everyone in Southern California has, at least once the run-up Interstate 15 from the Los Angeles basin, through a mountain gap called the Cajon Pass, out across roughly 270 miles of open Mojave Desert, and into the neon skyline of the Las Vegas Strip. 4 to 5 hours, door to door, if nothing goes wrong. Most of the time, nothing does. That's exactly what makes this road so easy to underestimate. If you're watching this from Los Angeles, from Las Vegas, or from anywhere along that stretch of desert in between, I want to know something. Have you made this drive after dark? Type it in the comments when we get there. Because by the end of this video, I don't think you'll look at that highway the same way again. And if you're the kind of person who likes learning what's actually hiding behind the roads this country drives every day without a second thought, subscribing costs you nothing, and it helps this channel keep finding stories like this one. Now, back to the desert. The road you're driving didn't start as a freeway. It started as a rumor of one. In the early 1910s, before Nevada highway signs existed, and before Las Vegas was much more than a railroad watering stop, a promoter named Charles Bigelow began pushing for an all-weather road connecting Los Angeles to Salt Lake City by way of the Mojave. They called it the Arrowhead Trail, and in 1916, Bigelow led an expedition across it with members of the newly formed Auto Club of Southern California, a Los Angeles Times reporter, and a Nevada state senator riding along. It took them 2 full days to cross the desert that you now cross in an afternoon. 2 days, in open cars, on unmarked dirt. Through the same heat and the same emptiness that still define this drive today, except back then, there was no gas station waiting on the other side, and no guarantee of finding one at all. The Arrowhead Trail was rough, mostly dirt, and largely unmarked. It entered Nevada near what's now the town of Primm, ran as a dirt track to the settlement of Jean, and rolled into Las Vegas along a road that became 5th Street, the same corridor that today carries the name Las Vegas Boulevard. In 1926, the Arrowhead Trail was formalized into U.S. Route 91, paved and widened over the following decades so that a full-day crossing eventually shrank to a matter of hours. Decades later, it became Interstate 15. The bones of the road you're on tonight are almost 110 years old. The speed at which people now drive them is not. The first real test of that road is only 45 miles outside Los Angeles, and it's the one part of this trip that even seasoned drivers respect. It's called the Cajon Pass, the gap the interstate cuts through the San Bernardino Mountains to climb out of the Los Angeles basin and onto the high desert plateau. Interstate 15 crests here at a signed elevation of roughly 4,260 feet at a location called Cajon Summit. On the way up, in a loaded car with the air conditioning fighting a losing battle, you'll feel your engine start to strain. On the way down the direction you're in when you're driving toward Las Vegas, the interstate drops via a sustained 6% grade for about 4 miles. Truck speed limits drop to 45 miles an hour on that descent. Passenger cars are still permitted 70. A runaway truck ramp sits on the shoulder roughly 2.5 miles down the grade. Built for exactly the failure mode this stretch of road is famous for. A fully loaded semi losing its brakes on the way down. This is not a hypothetical risk built into the signage as a formality. In May of 1989, a Southern Pacific freight train, following almost the same alignment through the pass, lost control on the descent. Derailed at more than 100 miles an hour on a curve rated for 35, and struck a residential neighborhood in San Bernardino, killing the train's engineer, its conductor, and 2 people asleep in their homes. The interstate and the railroad share the same problem, a grade steep enough that gravity, not the driver, ends up in charge. Today, this corridor moves an estimated 30 million tons of freight a year and is one of the busiest truck corridors in the western United States, carrying cargo straight from the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach into the interior. On any given afternoon, you are sharing this narrow mountain cut with more loaded 18-wheelers than almost anywhere else in the state. Running alongside the interstate, in the same narrow gap through the mountains, freight trains climb and descend the pass as well as many as 150 of them a day, part of the reason railfans still travel here just to watch. The interstate and the tracks were never really 2 separate stories. They're the same story, told twice, in 2 different kinds of vehicle, both of them fighting the exact same grade. And then there's the fog. Cajon Pass sits where cool marine air from the coast collides with the dry heat rising off the desert floor, and the result, on the wrong morning, is a wall of white that can drop visibility to 50 feet without warning. On January 16, 2019, that fog triggered a chain reaction crash involving roughly 19 vehicles near the summit, injuring about 35 people. Conditions were so thick that rescue helicopters couldn't fly, and ambulances had to carry the injured out by road instead. On the morning of May 2, 2025, it happened again. 5 vehicles collided near mile marker 25, in fog that logged at 50 feet of visibility, leaving 6 people with injuries to the head, chest, back, arms, and legs. These aren't freak one-time events. They're a pattern. Drivers crest the summit doing 70 miles an hour in clear air and descend directly into a fog bank they never saw coming sometimes with the sun still shining behind them. In another Cajon Pass fog pileup, a big rig came up on slower traffic ahead, jackknifed trying to avoid it, and swept roughly 30 more vehicles into the resulting chain reaction. Conditions that morning were so thick that rescue helicopters couldn't get a spotter aircraft into the air at all, and ambulances had to work the wreckage on the ground, alone. In another well-documented incident at the Cajon Junction interchange, more than 20 vehicles piled up within minutes after a single driver braked hard because the rising sun was directly in their eyes. Fog, glare, grade, weight, all 4 collide in the same 6-mile stretch of mountain road, and they don't care whether it's noon or midnight. North of the pass, the road stops climbing and starts stretching. This is where the character of the drive changes completely. You come down out of the mountains into Victorville, then Hesperia, then out across open desert toward Barstow, and the California Highway Patrol has specifically flagged the corridor between those 2 cities as one of the state's most dangerous, citing hundreds of documented potholes and long sections of uneven pavement layered under a highway that was never built for the volume it now carries. On an average day, more than 200,000 vehicles move through this stretch of San Bernardino County alone, most of them making the same round trip you are, Los Angeles to Las Vegas and back. Past Barstow, past the old mining town of Yermo, the road goes almost perfectly straight for long enough that your mind starts to drift, whether you want it to or not. The desert doesn't offer curves to keep you alert. It offers monotony, heat shimmer, and a horizon that doesn't change for 20 minutes at a time. Caltrans officials who've studied this corridor for years put it plainly. It's a straight route through open desert where you can see for miles, so people speed up and they stop paying attention. That single sentence is closer to the actual cause of death on this road than almost anything else you'll hear tonight. And after dark, the desert plays one more trick on you. The same sand and open sky that let daytime heat climb past 110 degrees let it escape again just as fast once the sun is gone. So a car that overheated crawling through afternoon traffic can, a few hours later, be fighting a windshield fogging from the sudden drop in temperature. One more small distortion of your senses, stacked on top of all the others, at 70 miles an hour. About 2/3 of the way to Las Vegas, you'll pass a 134-foot-tall thermometer rising out of the town of Baker, California. It was built in 1991. And its maximum reading 134 degrees Fahrenheit isn't decorative. It commemorates the temperature recorded nearby, in Death Valley, on July 10, 1913, the hottest air temperature ever officially measured on Earth. In summer, daytime highs here regularly climb past 110 degrees. That heat doesn't disappear when the sun goes down. Asphalt and engine blocks hold it for hours, which means tires, especially older tires, or ones already carrying a slow leak, are put under exactly the kind of stress that causes blowouts. Often well after dark, when a driver least expects a tire failure at 70 miles an hour with nothing around for 20 miles but sand. Baker itself is often described as the last real stop before the emptiest part of the trip. Roughly 2/3 of the way from Los Angeles, and still more than an hour from the Nevada line. Skip the stop here, and the next meaningful services are a long way off, in country that offers almost nothing to break your attention except the thermometer shrinking in your mirror. From Baker, the road climbs one more time. 15 miles before the Nevada line, you reach Mountain Pass, California, an unincorporated cluster of buildings sitting at 4,730 feet. The highest point on the entire drive between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. This is the exact spot where this video opened. It is remote even by desert standards. And it's here, or close to it, that the road stops being merely long and starts being genuinely isolating, the kind of isolating where if something goes wrong, the nearest help might be a very long way off, in the dark, with your phone showing no bars. That isolation has a body count, and I want to walk you through some of it carefully, and only using what's actually been confirmed by investigators and reported by name. On May 15, 2025, a motorcyclist named Donald Post was killed when his motorcycle collided with a sedan on the southbound side of Interstate 15 near Cajon Junction, right at the gateway to the pass we just described. Motorcyclists on this stretch are especially exposed to no roll cage, no airbags, and drivers around them who are often doing 70 in the dark, misjudging distance to a single narrow taillight instead of a full set of headlights. A little over a year later, just south of Hodge Road on the northbound side of the interstate, a rollover crash claimed two young men. Pablo I. de Jesus, 20 years old, of Victorville, was behind the wheel of a Chevrolet Equinox. His passenger, Joseph J. Orduno, 36, of Apple Valley, was riding with him. The crash was reported at 11:20 at night, on the same kind of dead-straight desert tarmac you'd have been driving 20 minutes earlier if you'd left Los Angeles that evening. For reasons investigators are still trying to determine, the SUV veered off the roadway, struck a guardrail, rolled multiple times, and hit a metal pole supporting freeway signage. Both men were pronounced dead at the scene. It was full dark. There were no other vehicles involved, just a straight stretch of desert highway, a car that left the lane, and two names that are now part of this road's history: And in the small hours of May 2nd, 2026, 12:56 in the morning, the Our National data consistently marks as the most dangerous of the entire week to be on the road. A driver named Mackenzie Santos was alone in an SUV heading southbound through the Cajon Pass, right where the interstate splits toward the 215 truck bypass in Devore. Something caused the vehicle to strike the center divider wall. It began smoking. Santos was trapped inside. California Highway Patrol officers and San Bernardino County fire personnel reached the scene and worked to get her out, but despite their efforts, she was pronounced dead at the location. The freeway closed in both directions while crews worked through the debris in the dark. Traffic rerouted onto the 215 for hours before dawn, headlights backed up for miles behind a scene most of those drivers would never see. 3 names, spread across a little over a year. Different circumstances, but the same underlying pattern in 2 of the 3 a single vehicle, out on the loneliest part of this corridor, well after midnight. With no other car involved, and nothing around for miles to catch a mistake before it became permanent. If stories like these are the reason you're still here, that's exactly the kind of thing this channel exists to document, not the sensational version, just what actually happened, sourced and named where it's known. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. It helps more than you'd think. Now, back to the corridor. Not every tragedy on this stretch has come from a car at all. On the night of February 9th, 2024, a chartered helicopter left Palm Springs bound for Boulder City, Nevada, carrying 6 people on a route roughly parallel to this highway. Shortly after 10 o'clock that night, in rain and snow moving through the same high desert terrain this road cuts across, the aircraft went down near Halloran Springs Road, not far from where Interstate 15 crosses into this remote stretch of the Mojave. All 6 people aboard were killed, including Herbert Wigwe, the 57-year-old chief executive of Nigeria's Access Bank, his wife Doreen, their 29-year-old son, and Abimbola Ogunbanjo, the former chairman of Nigeria's stock exchange. Motorists driving this same interstate that night saw the crash and called it in, some of them pulling onto the shoulder in the dark to flag down help, in a stretch of desert with almost nothing else around for miles. The National Transportation Safety Board investigated for months, working to understand exactly what a low-visibility desert storm, at night, over unfamiliar terrain, had done to a flight crew who never made it to Boulder City. What that crash confirms is something this road has been telling us in smaller ways for 100 years. This terrain, in darkness, in weather, does not forgive mistakes whether you're 8,000 feet up in the air or 8 feet off the shoulder of the highway. Not every fatal incident here happens after dark either, and it's worth being honest about that. On June 22, 2026, shortly before 1 in the afternoon, in broad daylight and clear weather, a red Chevrolet Tahoe rolled over on the northbound side of the interstate near Calico Road, close to Yermo. 3 people were killed. 2 occupants were ejected from the vehicle as it tumbled into the center divider. An off-duty paramedic who happened to be passing stopped to help and radioed in that a child among the survivors had suffered a head injury, while emergency crews requested air support to get the most critically hurt to a trauma center. Daylight didn't save that vehicle. Speed and a lost angle of control did the same thing they always do out here. Regardless of what time the clock reads, a reminder that everything you're hearing tonight about darkness is a multiplier on the risk, not the sole cause of it. This road is dangerous in full sun. It's simply, measurably more dangerous once that sun is gone. So what does a pattern like this actually add up to? Strip away the individual stories and a small number of contributing factors show up again and again, in crash report after crash report. Long, dead straight sightlines that invite speed and punish inattention. a mountain grade steep enough to overheat brakes and roll trucks. Fog and glare that arrive with almost no warning in exactly the section of road where everyone is still adjusting their following distance. Extreme heat that quietly degrades tires for 100 miles before they fail. Distances between exits long enough that a mechanical problem, a medical emergency, or a simple wrong turn can leave you stranded for longer than most drivers are used to tolerating. And running underneath nearly every one of those factors is the one variable that changes the most the moment the sun goes down: the driver. Fatigue doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, a few hours into a monotonous drive, and by the time a driver notices their eyes drifting shut, they've often already crossed the line separating drowsy from asleep. If only for a second or two, which at 70 miles an hour is roughly the length of a football field with nobody's hands actually steering the car. This is where the after dark part of tonight's title stops being a mood and starts being math. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, drivers involved in fatal crashes are roughly 3 times more likely to be alcohol impaired at night than during the day. In federal data broken down by hour, that pattern gets sharper the later it gets in the window between midnight and 3 in the morning, the exact hour Mackenzie Santos died in the Cajon Pass. Close to 2 out of every 3 fatal crashes nationwide involve a driver who has been drinking. Nationally, nighttime driving accounts for somewhere close to half of all traffic fatalities, despite making up only around a quarter of the miles Americans actually drive. That imbalance isn't an accident of statistics. It's fatigue setting in after a long day. It's headlight glare cutting your usable sightline down to a few hundred feet at highway speed, roughly 500 feet on high beams, closer to 250 on low beams, according to the National Safety Council, which at 70 miles an hour gives you well under 5 seconds to see a problem and react to it. It's depth perception and peripheral vision, both quietly worse after dark, on a road that is already asking you to react fast to a truck jackknifing or a car stalled dead in your lane. Now put that national pattern onto this specific highway. This is, by design and by tradition, a corridor people drive for parties, for weddings, for weekend blowouts, for one more hand of blackjack before checkout. On the Nevada side alone, somewhere between 60 and 80,000 vehicles travel this interstate every single day near the state line, and law enforcement in the Las Vegas Valley routinely makes close to 100 DUI arrests over a single holiday weekend. Traffic safety researchers who've studied the Nevada portion of I-15 specifically point to the stretch between Prim and Sloan long, dark, with almost no exits as a corridor where fatigue-related crashes cluster, especially late at night, when drivers are either heading home exhausted after days of no sleep or heading in. Adrenaline high, attention already somewhere else. You are, in other words, driving one of the deadliest highways in the country at the exact hours when driving itself becomes measurably more dangerous, on a road engineered to lull you into complacency for 270 straight miles. Federal seatbelt data adds one more layer that's hard to ignore. In an earlier 15-year study of this same corridor, more than half of the people who died here were not wearing a seatbelt at the time of the crash, on a road with this many single-vehicle rollovers cars that leave the lane, hit a guardrail, and tumble. The difference between walking away and becoming one of these statistics often comes down to a click that takes less than 2 seconds. Where does that leave the road today? In late 2025, a nationwide analysis of federal crash data confirmed what California's own transportation officials have said for years: this exact 181-mile stretch of Interstate 15. connecting Los Angeles to Las Vegas through San Bernardino County, is the single deadliest highway segment in the United States, based on total fatal crashes recorded over a recent 3-year window. It isn't the first time this corridor has topped that kind of list, and transportation planners don't expect it to be the last. Freight volume through the Cajon Pass alone is estimated to cost the regional economy more than $3 billion a year in congestion, with more than 15,000 hours of truck delay logged annually in the pass by regional transportation officials. And infrastructure agencies are actively studying ways to widen, straighten, and modernize sections of the route. Runaway truck ramps are inspected and cleared. Guardrails get replaced. Every few years, a new round of funding is proposed to finally fix the worst of the pavement between Victorville and Barstow that the Highway Patrol has been flagging for over a decade. There's even a planned high-speed passenger rail line Brightline West mapped to roughly follow this same historic corridor from Southern California into Las Vegas, offering for the first time in 100 years an alternative to driving it at all. Until any of that changes something fundamental, though, the interstate you're picturing right now looks almost exactly the way it did a generation ago. 2 ribbons of asphalt, a painted line down the middle, and 270 miles of desert on either side, still carrying more than 200,000 vehicles a day toward the same summit, the same pass, and the same fog bank that's been waiting there since before the freeway had a number. Which brings us back to where we started. 4,730 feet above sea level, 15 miles from the Nevada line, at the exact point where the last of the daylight disappears behind Clark Mountain to the north, and the only light left on the road is whatever your own headlights can throw in front of you. No gas station, no signal, just you, 70 miles an hour. And a couple hundred more miles of a highway that a nationwide analysis of federal crash data has already ranked, in writing, as the most dangerous one in the country. People make this drive every single day and arrive just fine. Millions of them, every year, headlights pointed at the same stretch of desert, the same fog bank, the same 6% grade, and almost all of them get there without incident. That's not luck erasing the risk. It's the risk working exactly the way the numbers say it does, most of the time until the night it doesn't, until it's a driver who nodded off for 1 second too long near Hodge Road, or a helicopter that flew into weather it never saw coming near Halloran Springs, or a car that simply didn't make the curve it had made 100 times before, in daylight, when the margins were wider. If there's one thing worth taking from everything you just heard, it's this. The safest way to drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas isn't a faster car, a bigger cup of coffee, or a louder playlist. It's leaving early enough that the sun is still up when you cross that summit. And if you can't do that, it's treating every mile after dark on this road exactly the way the statistics say you should like the most dangerous stretch of driving you'll do all year. Because on paper, it already is. If you've made this drive after dark yourself, I'd genuinely like to hear how it went. Leave it in the comments below.